Chapter 478. In the boundless wilderness, a large group of cavalrymen was marching southward. They were not moving fast, and it seemed that they were not in a hurry. In the middle of the group, a little girl wearing a black riding suit and a red wide-brimmed hat asked in a crisp voice, "Teacher, which family is your mother from?" "The Sangus family." "What about your grandmother?" "I think it's the Billy family." "What about your great-grandmother?" "The Rick family." "What about your great-great-grandmother?" Colin glanced at Princess Judy beside him and said somewhat speechlessly, "I don't remember." He actually understood why Princess Judy had suddenly started a background check. Of course, it was because he had advanced to the 6th grade. In this world where strength was closely related to bloodline, the bloodline of a 6th grade knight would naturally receive a lot of attention. A bloodline that could give birth to a 6th grade knight was definitely a top bloodline. After all, there were only 7 bloodlines that could give birth to a 7th grade paladin. The Angeli family was obviously not a top bloodline, which was why Princess Judy was concerned about Colin's maternal bloodline. However, Sangus, Billy, Rick, Princess Judy had never heard of these families before. They were clearly unknown small nobles, and had nothing to do with top bloodlines. Princess Judy's lively big eyes rolled a few times, and suddenly had a bold guess about her teacher's background. But she did not dare to say this guess out loud. But if she did not say it out loud, the little girl would feel uncomfortable. As her eyes wandered, she happened to meet Prince Harrison's gaze. The brother and sister seemed to have telepathy, and instantly understood each other's meaning, and immediately smiled knowingly. This little action naturally could not escape Colin's eyes, but he did not explain anything. Misunderstanding that he was the illegitimate son of some great noble in Grey Castle was better than revealing the secret of the vampires. Colin was somewhat curious about whether his increased strength by drinking the blood of high-grade paladins would affect the bloodline of his descendants. If one day he successfully advanced to the Sanctuary Realm, would a new paladin family be born? As for whether he could advance to the Sanctuary Realm, Colin did not have any doubts. He was very confident in his vampire cheat. As long as he could get his hands on the fresh blood of a holy knight, Colin was very confident that he would be able to step into the Holy Realm. However, if such a day really came, then the people of this world would probably think that he was the illegitimate son of a Holy Knight family member. He wondered if there would be a melodramatic farce of them acknowledging their ancestors. While he was lost in his thoughts, a messenger came back from the front and reported to Colin, "Sir, I'm sorry. Your lordship, White Dew City is just ahead." Hearing this, Colin immediately looked up and saw a small white appear on the horizon. "Knight Andy, it's your turn." Knight Andy, who was called out by Colin, immediately bowed and said with a flattering smile, "Okay, please wait a moment. I'll open the door for you." Ever since he learned that Colin had become a knight of the 6th step, the attitude of this emissary from the San Lorenzo family changed completely. He probably thought that Colin was a descendant of some paladin family that had been left behind. And judging from the age when Colin became a knight of the 6th step, it was not impossible for him to advance to the Holy Realm one day with such a terrible talent. Therefore, it was understandable that Knight Andy would be so respectful after being arrogant. "Teacher, we won't fight in White Dew City this time, right?" Princess Judy asked crisply. Colin gave a playful smile and said, "Of course not. After all, His Majesty's war order has been sent." On the city wall of White Dew City, in the face of the approaching bloody cavalry, the defenders in the city certainly did not dare to take it lightly. The Pegasus Legion and the private army of the lords recruited by the Duke of St. Prospero all gathered their elites and waited on the city wall. At the same time, a large number of reserves began to gather on the streets of the city. Last time when the bloody cavalry arrived, the Duke of St. Prospero opened the city gate in order to lure the enemy in. He tried to cooperate with the enemy from the inside and outside and besieged the bloody cavalry in White Dew City. But it was a pity that this trick failed. Not only did it fail to trap the bloody cavalry, but it also cost the life of the Duke of St. Prospero. It could be said that this strategy was a failure. Therefore, this time, it became the consensus of everyone to defend the city to the death. "Earl Nicole, do you think the bloody cavalry will storm the city?" Hearing the question of a noble behind him, Earl Nicole's old face was slightly pale, but he still pretended to be calm and said, "Don't worry, it's common sense that cavalry is not good at attacking the city. As long as we firmly guard the city gate and don't let the bloody cavalry enter the city, no matter how crafty Colin Angeli is, he can't do anything." Hearing this, the nobles of the eastern region all agreed, and the atmosphere suddenly became much more relaxed. But Earl Nicole did not feel relaxed at all. In fact, the old Earl only felt sad at this moment. Although they had the absolute advantage in numbers, none of the nobles of the eastern region dared to propose to go out of the city to fight. In fact, even if someone proposed to go out of the city to fight, Earl Nicole would have rejected it. But he still hoped to hear such voices. At least it would prove that the courage of the nobles of the eastern region was not completely wiped out. However, the fact was that only 20,000 bloody cavalry blocked the nobles of the eastern region in White Dew City, and they did not dare to come out. This was simply a great shame. "My lord, the other side sent a messenger. Should we bring him up?" Earl Nicole woke up from his thoughts and saw that the cavalry on the opposite side had separated from the main force and was heading to White Dew City. "Put down the basket and pull him up. I'd like to see what the people of the northern frontier have to say." After a while, Knight Andy was brought to Earl Nicole. "Knight Andy." Earl Nicole was knowledgeable and recognized the knight of the San Lorenzo family. Then, without waiting for Knight Andy to reply, Earl Nicole immediately realized and said, "You are the messenger of the royal family, right? His Majesty's war order has arrived, right?" "Yes, Earl Nicole, I brought the war order personally signed by His Majesty, and it has been successfully passed by the Senate." Knight Andy waved the letter, but did not intend to hand it to Earl Nicole. He just asked in a reserved manner, "I need to send the war order to White Dew Castle, please excuse me." Of course. Earl Nicole's old face was smiling like a chrysanthemum, because he knew that once His Majesty's war order arrived, the war between the lords of the empire had to stop. So, he immediately called his guards and asked them to escort Knight Andy to White Dew Castle. Before Knight Andy left, he did not forget to point outside the city and said, "Earl Angeli from the northern frontier is outside the city. Remember to send someone to welcome him." Earl Nicole frowned again, looking at the cavalry army slowly approaching outside the city, and fell into silence. The nobles of the eastern region around him were still immersed in the excitement of the war order smoothly arriving at White Dew City, and seemed to have forgotten that there was a terrifying army outside the city. Earl Nicole said to his adjutant, "Since Knight Andy came from the bloody cavalry, then Colin Angeli must have seen His Majesty's war order. If he does not want to become a public enemy of the empire, then he will not start a war. How about this? You send a messenger out of the city to test the other side's attitude." "My lord, who should I send?" Earl Nicole suddenly hesitated. He glanced at the nobles of the eastern region in front of him, and his frown deepened. "I'll go." Just as Earl Nicole was at his wit's end, Beatrice appeared at the top of the city wall. Count Nicol breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. "Knight Beatrice, it's best if you are willing to go." Chapter 479. Under the White Dew City, Beatrice once again came to the blood cavalry alone. Colin greeted her like a gentleman this time. The two met in the middle of the army and the city. "Knight Beatrice, we meet again. Count Angeli, you came to the White Dew City in such a big way. Are you not going to fulfill the agreement between us?" Colin shrugged and said helplessly, "You can't blame me. You can only blame the messenger of the royal family for coming too fast." "So, are we going to give up?" Beatrice asked unwillingly. "Give up?" Colin smiled. "There is no such word in my dictionary." Beatrice's eyes lit up and immediately asked, "Count Angeli, do you have any good ideas?" Colin looked at the tall walls of the White Dew City and slowly said, "Since the war order has been sent to the White Dew City, of course, I can't take the initiative to provoke them." Hearing Colin's emphasis on the word, "take the initiative," Beatrice understood and said, "Are you going to let the eastern region do it first?" Beatrice slowly shook her head and said, "You may be disappointed. The eastern region is now eager to stop the war with the northern frontier. How can they take the initiative to provoke them?" Colin looked at Beatrice meaningfully and said, Are you not from the eastern region? You mean, let me take the initiative to provoke them? Beatrice looked at Colin in surprise. I know you don't have many troops in the city, but you can choose a time to assassinate me. Hearing this, Beatrice's heart suddenly skipped a few beats, and her eyes subconsciously avoided Angeli's eyes. But soon she found that Colin's expression was not abnormal, so she calmed down. Colin did not find Beatrice's strangeness and still said, "Since you have decided to assassinate the Archbishop of the Eastern region, you must be ready to escape. Then it should be okay to carry the crime of ignoring His Majesty's war order and assassinating the Count of the Empire, right? As long as you stab me, the bloody cavalry will have a reason to enter the city to protect their master. At this time, you can arrange your trusted subordinates to open the city gate for the bloody cavalry. Then, the bloody cavalry will help you clear the guards around Mrs. Kate. You should know what to do next, right?" Beatrice took a deep look at Colin, then nodded decisively. "All right, we'll do as you say." After that, Colin returned to the army and ordered Roger to lead the army to camp outside the city. He then brought Prince Harrison, Princess Judy, and 100 guards to follow Beatrice into White Dew City. Walking on the streets of White Dew City, Colin calmly looked around, admiring the scenery of the capital of the Eastern region. Compared with the magnificent Winter City, White Dew City was less imposing, but more exquisite. And because it was close to the radiant moon forest, the architectural style in the city was inevitably influenced by the elves, emphasizing the harmony with nature and using reliefs and columns. Compared with the general closed buildings, the ring pillar style of the Eastern region's buildings did not have a sense of dullness. Under the sunlight, it could produce rich light and shadow effects and change between reality and illusion. It also weakened the boundary between the inside and outside, so that the outdoor scenery became part of the architectural decoration. This was the first time Colin came to White Dew City, and he immediately fell in love with it. Unfortunately, the people here obviously did not like the Count from the northern frontier. Along the way, countless people of the eastern region did not hide their hatred for Colin. If there were no soldiers on both sides of the street, perhaps the angry people of the eastern region would have already rushed up. Prince Harrison and Princess Judy appeared to be a little nervous under these hostile gazes, but Colin acted as if nothing had happened. He was still admiring the buildings on both sides of the street with great interest. Because of this, Colin did not notice that there were two old acquaintances hidden among the angry people of the eastern region. "Let's go, sister. In this case, you can't succeed in the assassination." The Earl of Avon pulled down the brim of his hat, trying to shrink himself to the back of the crowd, and advised Anna beside him. Anna stared at Colin's tall figure on horseback. The veins on her right hand holding the sword were bulging, as if she was about to draw the sword in the next moment. Seeing this, the Earl of Avon quickly held his sister's hand, leaned close to her ear, and whispered, "Anna, believe me, if you assassinate him now, you will only alert him." Anna turned her head, looked at her brother with red eyes, and said angrily, "Are we not going to avenge father?" "Of course." The Earl of Avon said firmly, "But not like this. Believe me, I have a better way." Anna stared into her brother's eyes for a long time, and finally sighed, letting go of the sword hilt. The Earl of Avon quickly pulled his sister out of the crowd, and walked quickly along the alley toward the city gate. Anna became more and more confused as they walked, and finally could not help but ask, "Brother, are you going the wrong way? White Dew Castle is in that direction." "No, we can't go to White Dew Castle." "Why?" "Because once we go to White Dew Castle, I will be under house arrest." Seeing Anna's confused face, the Earl of Avon sighed and said, "Don't ask, sister. If you believe me, then follow me." Anna bit her lip and did not say anything, letting her brother lead her through the city. "Stop, this is a military area. Unrelated people are not allowed to approach." In front of the city gate tower, the brother and sister were stopped by a group of patrolling soldiers. "I have urgent military information to report. Can you take me to see your commanding officer?" The soldier sized up the Earl of Avon. Although he was wearing ordinary clothes, the sword at his waist did not seem to be ordinary. "Then wait here." Not long after, a knight was led to the Earl of Avon by the soldiers. What urgent military information do you have to report? The Earl of Avon looked at the insignia on the knight's armor, and lifted the brim of his hat, revealing half of his face, and said, I want to see Earl Nicole. Can you take me there? Is the Earl someone you can see just because you want to? The knight was stunned as he finally recognized the identity of the person in front of him. You are Lord Earl of Avon? The Earl of Avon raised a finger. Don't make a fuss, take me to see Earl Nicole. The knight nodded blankly, and then led the Earl of Avon and Anna to the city gate tower. On the city gate, Earl Nicole was still staring at the bloody cavalry that was setting up camp outside the city. No one knew what he was thinking. Earl Nicole, this, sir wants to see you. Earl Nicole frowned and asked without turning his head, Who wants to see me? It's me. Hearing this slightly familiar voice, Earl Nicole finally turned his head, and then saw the Earl of Avon's smiling face. Earl of Avon, Earl Nicole said in surprise, but then immediately lowered his voice and said, When did you enter the city? I've been in the city for a while, the Earl of Avon said vaguely. Can we change to a more convenient place? I don't want others to know that I'm here. Okay, please come with me. Chapter 480. As the door was gently closed, the inside and outside of the room were separated into two different worlds. Only Earl Nicole and the Earl of Avon were in the room. Even Anna did not come in. Earl Nicole personally poured a glass of wine for the Earl of Avon and laughed. Earl of Avon, there is no good wine in the camp. Please make do with it. Hi, you may not know, but for a real drunkard, good wine is good, but bad wine can also have a different taste. The Earl of Avon took the glass, clinked it with Earl Nicole's, and then drank it in one gulp. Earl Nicole put down his glass and asked, Earl of Avon, since you have been in White Dew City for a long time, why have you been hiding your whereabouts? The Earl of Avon laughed and said, Earl Nicole, let's not test each other here and waste time, okay? Don't tell me you don't know the reason why I have not dared to show myself. Earl Nicole also laughed and praised, I have long heard that you are extraordinarily intelligent, Earl of Avon. Seeing you today, I can see that you are indeed so. The Earl of Avon shook his head and sighed. If it was in the past, I might have accepted your praise calmly, and even secretly felt proud. But now, I finally know that compared to a real genius, I am really weak, especially on the battlefield. Earl of Avon, in fact, this is really not your fault. The Eastern Region Army has been at peace for too long. Compared to the bloody cavalry that fought their way out of the sky ice field, the difference in strength is too great. No matter who is in command, the result will be the same. The Earl of Avon did not respond. He just poured another glass of wine for himself and Earl Nicole. The two brothers in distress wanted to drown their sorrows in wine. But soon, Count Elvin put down his wine cup and said with a serious expression, Don't worry. Earl Nicole, do you know why I took the initiative to come to you? Count Nicole glanced at the Earl of Avon and shook his head. Count Evan immediately said in a deep voice, Count Nicole, I'm here to help you. Earl Nicole's eyes flashed, and he said with a smile, Earl Evan, why would I need your helps? Earl of Avon did not answer the question directly. Instead, he asked, What kind of promise did my mother give you? Obviously, Count Nicole didn't want to reveal the agreement between him and the Duchess to Count Evan. Also, he felt that he had seen through Count Evan's true intentions, so the smile on his face gradually disappeared. Earl of Avon, I think you're trying to get my help, aren't you? However, with all due respect, your brother is the most suitable successor to the Duke of the Eastern Region in this situation. The Earl of Avon sneered, My brother? Or my nephew, who's only 3 years old? Earl Nicole's expression did not change. Either of them can come, but it can't be you. The Eastern Region needs the Hall family too much at this time. I agree. The Earl of Avon said frankly, and you've misunderstood my intentions. I'm not trying to persuade you to support me in becoming the Duke of the Eastern Region. Earl Nicole was a little surprised and puzzled. Then why did you come to me? I've already said that I'm here to help you, the Earl of Avon said with a smile. Earl Nicole looked at the Earl of Avon in surprise and asked, What can you help me with? Of course, to help you and the Nicole family get out of their biggest predicament. The Earl of Avon said in a low voice. Count Nickel's frown deepened. Count Avon, what is the biggest predicament of the Nickel family? Earl Nickel, don't you know what your family's biggest predicament is? As an outsider and a traitor, the Nickel family has never been able to truly integrate into the eastern region. Do you really think that if you cooperate with my mother this time, she will help you solve this problem in return? Earl Nickel was silent. He knew that the Earl of Avon was right. The Nickel family's emblem was alpine tinder. Yes, it was the tinder in Tinder City. More than 300 years ago, Tinder City was still the territory of the Nickel family, and the Tinder Army was also the name of the Nickel family's private army. Of course, at that time, the area north of the Alsace Mountains was still the territory of the St. Thean family, and the Nickel family was naturally the vassal of the St. Thean family. Therefore, when the House of St. Prospero defeated the St. Thean family, the Nickel family became an awkward existence. At that time, the Nickel family saw that the situation was not good and decisively chose to surrender to the House of St. Prospero. In order to break the fighting spirit of the vassal of the St. Thean family, the Duke of St. Prospero chose to accept the Nickel family's allegiance to show his mercy. However, the Nickel family was, after all, a vassal of the St. Thean family, and naturally could not be fully trusted by the House of St. Prospero. For example, the Duke of St. Prospero conferred Tinder City, a military stronghold, to the Bruggen family, and the Nickel family's territory was changed to the south of the Alsace Mountains. The Nickel family also knew that the House of St. Prospero had always been vigilant against them, so they had been cautious and low-key for many years, trying to eliminate the prejudice of the Duke of St. Prospero against the Nickel family. For example, in the recent battle for succession between Marquis Vincent and the Earl of Avon, most of the nobles in the eastern region chose to side with them, but the Nickel family had always been indifferent. Of course, this was indeed because Earl Nickel was astute and knew the risks, but more importantly, it was because the Nickel family did not dare to easily express their stance, for fear of attracting the attention of the Duke of St. Prospero. Now that Count Evan pointed out this point, countless thoughts flashed through Count Nickel's mind. After a while, he said in a deep voice, after a long while, he said, Earl of Avon, I wonder if you have any way to help the Nickel family get out of this awkward situation? The Earl of Avon smiled mysteriously and took out an exquisite badge from his arms. The kite shield-shaped badge was engraved with a pattern of a roaring tiger. It was unknown what material it was made of, but under the sunlight, it reflected a colorful light. Upon seeing this familiar badge, Earl Nickel was stunned. He looked at the Earl of Avon in disbelief and asked in a trembling voice, What? What a colorful tiger? Your Excellency, where did you get this badge? The Earl of Avon smiled and said, Of course, Mr. Feng gave it to me. Mr. Feng? Earl Nickel was pleasantly surprised and somewhat in disbelief. Didn't he die at the hands of Prince Arle? You believe such a rumor? The Earl of Avon asked rhetorically. If so, how could Prince Rhy be reduced to such a state? Who is the person he is tracking all over the world? Earl Nickel suppressed his excitement and asked in a low voice, What agreement have you reached with Mr. Feng? The Earl of Avon smiled reservedly and said, I will marry Mr. Feng's daughter, and Mr. Feng will help me control the eastern region. Daughter? Earl Nickel was puzzled. Aren't you already engaged to Grace of the Bruggen family? The Earl of Avon smiled mysteriously and said, You will understand in the future. Now, do you think that compared to my mother, I am a better partner for the Nickel family? Earl Nickel's gaze was fixed on the colorful tiger badge in the Earl of Avon's hand. He nodded and said, Yes. If you have reached an agreement with Mr. Feng, then the Nickel family is naturally willing to follow in your footsteps. Very good, Count Elvin said mysteriously as he put away the badge with a smug smile. Earl Nickel, White Dew City will be especially lively tonight. Please wait and see. Chapter 481. Prince Harrison, Princess Judy, Count Angeli, welcome to the White Dew Castle. In front of the White Dew Castle, the Duchess, who was dressed to the nines, had an impeccable smile on her face as she welcomed the guests. It was as if she had completely forgotten that this guest had just led an army to attack the White Dew Castle and killed her husband. Colin jumped off his horse and walked to the Duchess with a smile on his face. "This is my first visit, so I didn't prepare any expensive gifts. I hope you don't mind." Colin clapped his hands as he spoke, and the 4 guards behind him immediately carried a coffin forward. It was needless to say whose body was in the coffin. The atmosphere suddenly changed, and the air became so stagnant that it was almost suffocating. The people of the House of St. Prospero were spitting fire from their eyes. If looks could kill, then Colin would be riddled with holes by now. Unfortunately, gazes couldn't kill people. The people of the House of St. Prospero could only rage helplessly. The Duchess, on the other hand, had a calm expression, as if the body in the coffin was just a stranger's body. "Count Angeli, you're too kind. The House of St. Prospero will definitely remember such a valuable gift." Colin raised his eyebrows. For a moment, he didn't want to continue provoking her. Otherwise, it would feel like he was bullying a widow. He glanced at the people behind the Duchess and asked in confusion, "Why don't I see Marquis Vincent?" "Vincent was severely injured and is still unconscious. That's why he couldn't come and greet you." "Severely injured and unconscious?" Colin blinked his eyes. "I want to visit the Marquis. Is it convenient for you?" As soon as these words were spoken, the people of the House of St. Prospero started breathing heavily. They obviously thought that Colin's hypocrisy was a provocation. The Duchess' expression also became gloomy. She said coldly, "I'm sorry, Count Angeli. I appreciate your kindness. However, it's not convenient for Vincent to see outsiders right now. When he recovers, it won't be too late to see you." After all, he was in someone else's territory. Colin didn't want to be too arrogant, so he nodded. "All right." The Duchess turned to the side and extended her hand in an inviting gesture. "Please come in, 3 distinguished guests. We have already prepared a room for you. Please rest first. There will be a grand welcome banquet tonight." Colin nodded and strode into White Dew Castle as if there was no one around while he faced the undisguised hostile gazes. Prince Harrison and Princess Judy also followed. Under the guidance of the maid, Colin walked into his room. The overall architectural style of White Dew Castle was exquisite and elegant. The main body was built with carefully cut white glazed rock. The ground and walls were suffused with a faint layer of beige. Jadeite, rubies, and sapphires could be seen everywhere in the room. One could even see sparkling and translucent diamonds inlaid in conspicuous places. There were many oil paintings of different styles and some animal head specimens hanging on the wall. Colin didn't have the ability to appreciate art, so he didn't pay attention to them after a glance. "Sir, do you need me to help you bathe and change your clothes?" the young maid asked with a red face. "No need. I'll do it myself. You can leave." After rejecting the maid's good intentions, Colin took off his armor and went to the bathroom alone. Warm water had already been prepared in the bathtub, and there was a faint fragrance of jasmine. He didn't know where the House of St. Prospero had gotten the jasmine flowers in the middle of winter. Colin slowly sat in the bathtub and felt the warm water soak into every inch of his skin. He closed his eyes comfortably. However, his mind didn't stop. Colin definitely didn't believe the Duchess when she said that Marquis Vincent was seriously injured and unconscious. After all, as a blood descendant he had transformed into, unless Marquis Vincent's head was chopped off, any kind of injury would only be a scratch to him. How could he be seriously injured and unconscious? He couldn't be pretending to be dead, right? And he didn't even come out to welcome him when he arrived at White Dew Castle. Colin had started to be vigilant when he saw the blood slaves voluntarily leaving food for their family in the small village outside of Linshue City. If a blood slave without self-awareness would unconsciously feel pity for their family, then what about a blood descendant with self-awareness? A blood descendant with self-awareness would be able to consider the pros and cons and weigh the pros and cons. Then, when a blood descendant found that the benefits of betrayal were far greater than loyalty, would he still choose loyalty? This was especially obvious with Marquis Vincent. Marquis Vincent obeyed Colin's words before, perhaps because he was a blood descendant, but perhaps because he needed Colin's help at that time. Without Colin, he would only be a pitiful worm abandoned by his father and framed by his younger brother. But now, Colin had already helped him clear all obstacles, and the position of Duke of the Eastern region was within his reach. Would Vincent still be willing to be Colin's servant and harm his own interests for him? Colin felt that it was unlikely. However, what was Marquis Vincent planning to do now? Was he going to pretend to be dead and deliberately not cooperate with Colin's next move? Was he going to wait until the Blood Cavalry had no choice but to withdraw from the Eastern region because of the war order before he came out to succeed the position of Duke of the Eastern region? Or was this guy already planning a more vicious plan to get rid of him once and for all and regain his freedom? The more Colin thought about it, the more he felt that the latter was more likely. The corners of his mouth gradually drew an arc, as if he felt that the current situation was very interesting, and even began to look forward to Marquis Vincent's next performance. But at this moment, Colin suddenly smelled a faint smell of blood. He suddenly opened his eyes and looked around, but found nothing unusual in the bathroom. But Colin's vigilance did not weaken at all. After all, he had just guessed that Marquis Vincent might bite back. Could this be a trap that he had set for him? Thinking of this, Colin stood up from the bathtub, wiped the water droplets on his body with a bath towel, and put on his clothes again. Then, he began to carefully identify the source of the smell of blood. But then, Colin found that the smell of blood was somewhat familiar, as if he had smelled it somewhere before. Walking into the bedroom, the smell of blood gradually became stronger. And Colin finally remembered that this was clearly the smell he had smelled in the underground blood pool in the Floral City. In the Schurz family's Swan Castle, there was also this smell. So, Earl Angeli. A deep and familiar voice sounded behind him. Colin's body stiffened, and the expression on his face became extremely complicated. He slowly turned around and looked at the familiar face that had appeared behind him at some point in time. He pulled out a stiff smile and said, "I'm sorry. Should I call you Duke of St. Hilda? Or Mr.?" Chapter 482. The name is not important. Mr. Chong smiled as he spoke. His attitude was so gentle that it was as if he was meeting an elder of his own family. Just like this body, it will only confuse mediocre people, but it will not fool smart people. Although he had long guessed that Mr. Chong might have used the corpse of the Duke of St. Hilda to play a reincarnation, when Colin really saw the resurrected Duke of St. Hilda with his own eyes and confirmed his previous guess, he could not help but be shocked. Even in this world of transcendence, such an unscientific thing was truly unbelievable. Was Arcana really so magical? Or was Mr. Chong just too resourceful? "I didn't expect to see you in White Dew Castle. It's truly an honor." Colin greeted with a smile. Although he tried his best to remain calm, the smile on his face was inevitably a little stiff. To be honest, Mr. Chong's appearance was completely out of his expectations. And what he hated the most was accidents. This legendary figure who had stirred up the northern frontier twice by himself was not an easy character to deal with. Especially now, after Mr. Chong had taken over the body of a paladin, Colin really had no idea how terrifying his strength would be. If such a person stood on the opposite side of him, Colin would not naively think that Mr. Chong's appearance in White Dew City was just a coincidence. Obviously, Mr. Chong had a plan here as well. But he did not know if it would conflict with his plan. "Count Angeli, this should be our first official meeting, right?" Mr. Chong looked at Colin with interest and said with a sigh, "I have long admired your great name," Colin said respectfully. At the same time, he kept guessing Mr. Chong's purpose in coming to White Dew City this time. "Actually, I have wanted to meet you for a long time, Count Angeli. Among the rising stars of the Radiance Empire in the past 10 years, you are the most outstanding one." Mr. Chong smiled and looked at Colin, not hiding the admiration in his eyes. "You flatter me." "No, not at all. In fact, I feel that I have always underestimated you." The corner of Colin's mouth twitched awkwardly. He felt that Mr. Cheng's praise was a little awkward and made him very uncomfortable. Just as she was about to say something, she heard Mr. Kuei ask again. "Count Angeli, you've reached rank 6, right?" Colin could only nod honestly and say, "Yes, I was lucky enough to advance just now." What a young tier 6 knight. As far as I can remember, even the most talented paladins of the Saint Thean family were not as powerful as you at your age. How can I be compared to my holy knight ancestors? No. Mr. Chung said seriously, you're even stronger than them. At least when they were your age, none of them could lead an army to attack White Dew City. Moreover, you can turn the eastern region upside down with only 20,000 bloody cavalrymen. Is it because you're too powerful? Or is it because the people of the eastern region have been living such a comfortable life for so long that the army has become so weak? The bad premonition in Colin's heart was getting stronger and stronger. His brain was spinning rapidly, thinking about the real purpose of Mr. Cheng, and at the same time he responded. No, I was just lucky to win a few battles. Mr. Chang smiled and finally stopped praising Colin. Instead, he said, when we were in Swan Castle, Archbishop Ajani told you all the secrets of the church, right? Colin hurriedly nodded and said, I agree with Archbishop Ajani's point of view very much. Nowadays, the church is too depraved. In the name of the God of Light, they keep interfering in the affairs of the empire and plundering private interests. So when I heard that you and Archbishop Ajani were determined to change the current situation, I chose to join you without hesitation. This time, I led the army to attack the eastern region because I want to cut off the church's biggest support in the secular world. What are your plans for coming to White Dew City this time? In fact, Colin was also very clear that the alliance between him, Mr. Cheng, and Archbishop Ajani was actually very fragile. Although both sides intended to resist the church, there was no basis of trust between them, and there was no clear goal or plan between them. There were even some old grudges and conflicts of interest between them. Colin did not think that Mr. Cheng would forget that he had repeatedly foiled his plans. It could even be said that the failure of the Saint Thean family to successfully occupy the northern frontier was mostly due to Colin. Now, he only hoped that Mr. Chung could temporarily put aside the grudges between them for the sake of the foundation of cooperation between them, and unite to cut off the church's tentacles in the eastern region. Mr. Cheng did not answer Colin's question, but said to himself, Count Angeli, in fact, I have always admired you, and I also very much hope to become your ally. Colin's heart sank, because he understood that generally there would be a but at the end of this sentence pattern. And all the words he said before this, but, were all bullshit. Sure enough, he heard Mr. Ching continue. But, you are too outstanding, so outstanding that it makes me tremble in fear. Colin pursed his lips and said helplessly, Mr. Cheng, isn't it a good thing to have an outstanding ally? It may be for some people, but not for me. Mr. Cheng stared into Colin's eyes, and there was a hint of regret in his eyes. I am a person with a strong desire for control, so I don't like those who are too outstanding and always bring me surprises and surprises. Colin's muscles instantly tightened, and he prepared for the worst, but he still tried to persuade him. Mr. Cheng, you have overestimated me. I am just the son of a baron in the countryside. Even if I become a count, it is because of the shadow of the house of St. Hilda. No. Mr. Cheng interrupted, and the smile on his face disappeared. Count Angeli, I have carefully investigated your past, and to be honest, I have a guilty conscience. If I give you more time, I don't even dare to imagine how far you will go. So, I am sorry. Hearing this, Colin no longer had any hope in his heart. His whole body surged like flowing water, and the holy light gathered in his hands. But before he could make a move, he saw Mr. Cheng's eyes suddenly emit a dazzling light. For a moment he felt like he saw the sun right in front of him. His eyes stung, and tears flowed out uncontrollably. Colin was shocked, and he immediately retreated. But in his blurred vision, he saw an arm shining with golden holy light, thrusting straight into his chest with the force of a thunderbolt. Poochie! Colin screamed, and he was shocked to find that his heart was already in Mr. Cheng's hand. Throw, Count Angeli! Bang! Mr. Cheng squeezed hard, and Colin's heart burst like a balloon filled with water. Blood splattered everywhere. Chapter 483. When Prince Harrison walked out of the bathroom, a maid hurriedly came forward to help him wipe off the water droplets. Having grown up in Phoenix Palace, Prince Harrison had long been used to being served by maids. He wouldn't be as pretentious as Colin. Of course, he wouldn't do anything ambiguous to a maid. As a prince, he wasn't that desperate. After putting on his formal attire, Prince Harrison let the maid apply perfume on him. "What time is the banquet?" "I'll go ask for you." "Okay." After the maid left, Prince Harrison looked in the mirror and adjusted his formal attire. After a moment, he finally revealed a satisfied smile. But just as he was about to turn around, Prince Harrison was shocked to find that there was an additional figure in the mirror. However, after seeing that person's face clearly, Prince Harrison immediately let out a sigh of relief. He turned around and asked, "Uncle Archway, why are you in White Dew City?" Prince Harrison actually wasn't afraid of Prince Rhy. Although everyone believed that this person had committed a heinous crime by brazenly killing a consul of the empire, Prince Harrison had accidentally overheard a conversation between his parents and knew that Prince Rhy had been wronged. Therefore, Prince Harrison actually felt a trace of guilt and sympathy towards this uncle of his. Prince Rhy sat down at the table, picked up the teapot, and poured himself a cup of flower tea. "I'm chasing after someone. Didn't you go to Silver Moon City? Why you here?" "I'm following my teacher here." "You still don't know, but my teacher is amazing. He led a mere 20,000 bloody cavalry and defeated the entire Eastern Army. If not for my father's war order being passed to White Dew City, I'm afraid this city would have fallen again." Prince Harrison used an incomparably proud tone to praise his teacher's glorious achievements. Only then did he notice the first sentence that Prince Rhy had just said. "Uncle Rhy, you said that you're chasing after someone? Who are you chasing after?" Prince Rhy took a sip of tea and said indifferently, "The person who set me up." Prince Harrison's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately became nervous. Because Prince Harrison did not know the whole truth, nor did he know Mr. Castle's role in this matter, when he heard Prince Leahy say that he was tracking down the people who had framed him, he mistakenly thought that he was referring to Emperor Reinhardt and Empress Medela. Prince Harrison's strange behavior naturally couldn't escape Prince Rhy's eyes. "Harrison, do you know something?" "Uncle, Prince Harrison panicked under Prince Lacy's sharp gaze. Of course, this made Prince Rhy even more certain that his nephew obviously knew some inside information. Thus, he stood up and walked in front of Prince Harrison. He placed a hand on Prince Harrison's shoulder and bowed slightly. "Harrison, tell me what you know." Prince Harrison felt as if the hand on his shoulder had grabbed his soul, and a shudder that originated from the depths of his heart swept through his entire body. But he still clenched his teeth and said resolutely, "Uncle, I can't betray father and mother." Prince Rhy had a mocking expression. "Your willpower is not bad, but it's a pity you used it in the wrong place. Has the San Lorenzo family fallen to the point where they have to rely on schemes and schemes to maintain their rule?" Prince Harrison's entire body trembled, and sweat poured down like rain, but he still stubbornly kept his mouth shut. Prince Rhy's expression became colder and colder. "Your father has already disgraced the glory of the San Lorenzo family. I didn't expect you to be the same kind of person. Sooner or later, the prestige of the royal family will be completely destroyed by you and your father. I can't allow such a thing to happen." Prince Rhy's eyes revealed an undisguised killing intent as he continued. "Harrison, I'll give you one last chance. Die despicably or live honorably. Choose for yourself." Prince Harrison felt the hand on his shoulder clench tighter and tighter, as if it was going to crush his body. This young prince was facing a choice between life and death for the first time. And he never expected that the person who would force him into a corner would be his own uncle. Something in his heart seemed to crumble and shatter at this moment. Prince Harrison suddenly thought of something his mother, Empress Medela, had said to him. A king is destined to be lonely, and also destined to be surrounded by lies and betrayals. Even your closest kin might not be trustworthy. You can only rely on yourself. Prince Harrison had always felt that his mother's words were a little too frightening, but now, facing his murderous uncle, he suddenly came to a realization. "Yes, uncle. You were framed." Prince Harrison used all his strength to growl. Prince Rhy's expression softened, but he still continued to ask, "Who framed me?" "It was father and mother. How did they frame you?" I really don't know. I just happened to overhear a few words of their conversation and guessed that you were innocent. As for how they framed you, I really don't know. Prince Rhy stared into Prince Harrison's eyes. After a while, he seemed to have finally confirmed that Prince Harrison was not lying. Then, are you willing to share what you know with the public? Prince Harrison hesitated for a moment, but then gritted his teeth and nodded. Only then did Prince Lacy retract his fierce aura and smile. Very good. That was what a righteous San Lorenzo should do. I will contact His Holiness to arrange a hearing. At this point, Prince Rhy suddenly paused. This was because he had sensed an intense wave of holy light erupting nearby. In a moment of desperation, Prince Rhy immediately threw Prince Harrison aside and disappeared from the room in a flash. Prince Harrison collapsed onto the ground, panting heavily. He couldn't muster any strength at all. After a long while, he finally struggled to get up, found a pen and paper, and quickly wrote a letter with trembling hands. Men. A maid pushed the door open and entered. Your Highness, what orders do you have? Prince Harrison handed the letter over and said, Send this letter to Imperial Dragon City immediately. The maid nodded, but after seeing Prince Harrison's sorry state, she carefully asked, Your Highness, do you need me to prepare a new set of clothes for you? On the other side, Prince Rhy rushed into Colin's room after chasing the source of the holy light, only to find that Colin was lying in a pool of blood. After carefully sensing the remaining energy waves in the air, Prince Rhy's eyes suddenly became extremely fierce. Who are you? The guards of the House of St. Prospero finally arrived and shouted at Prince Rhy's back. Prince Rhy, of course, did not care about these guards. He jumped out of the open window without looking back. Only then did the guards notice Colin lying in a pool of blood. They were immediately scared out of their wits. Quick, get a priest. Count Angeli was assassinated. Chapter 484. Night fell. The banquet hall of White Dew Castle was illuminated by hundreds of candles. Mighty and majestic armored guards stood motionless around the hall with long spears in their hands. Graceful and beautiful young maids walked with light steps, placing plates of delicious food on the long dining table. The well-dressed Duchess stood at the entrance of the banquet hall, greeting the guests with an impeccable smile. Although the Duke of St. Prospero had just died and it was inappropriate for White Dew Castle to hold such a big banquet, the Duchess insisted on it. Moreover, she also had a suitable excuse to welcome Prince Harrison and Princess Judy to White Dew Castle. As for the fact that the teacher of these two royal guests had just killed the Duke of St. Prospero, well, let's just pretend it didn't happen. Of course, many smart people also knew that the death of the Duke of St. Prospero might be a happy event for the Duchess. Only then could she truly become the mistress of White Dew Castle and even the entire eastern region. In the banquet hall, the Duchess was already the focus of everyone's attention. One by one, the nobles of the eastern region came forward, either openly or secretly expressing their loyalty to her. The Duchess gracefully and skillfully dealt with them, but secretly, her mind was always paying attention to the entrance of the hall. Seeing that the important people she was waiting for didn't appear, the Duchess broke away from the overly enthusiastic crowd and asked the butler, Where are the two princes? And Count Angeli, why isn't he here yet? I'll go take a look myself. Before the butler could take a few steps, he saw the captain of the White Dew Castle Guards, Knight Warren, striding over. The Duchess saw Knight Warren's dignified expression and slightly frowned. She hurriedly asked, Knight Warren, what's wrong? Knight Warren walked to the Duchess' side and reported in a low voice, Madam, just now Count Angeli was assassinated in his room. The Duchess held her breath, trying hard not to lose her composure. But before she could ask more about the situation, she heard a voice shouting beside her, What? Count Angeli was assassinated? In fact, Knight Warren had deliberately lowered his voice. Logically speaking, only the Duchess should have heard him clearly. However, he did not expect that Count Nicole, who happened to be passing by, would hear him and even shout out loud. Now, it was as if someone had pressed the mute button on the entire banquet. Instantly, there was complete silence. The Duchess glared fiercely at Count Nicole. She could not tell whether the exclamation was intentional or not, but she did not have the time to pursue the matter. She immediately stepped forward and whispered into Knight Warren's ear, "First, kill all the 100 guards that followed Colin Angeli into the city. Second, lock down all the city gates and forbid anyone from entering or leaving. Third, gather the army and get ready. The bloody cavalry. I'm afraid they're going to go crazy." Hearing the last sentence, Knight Warren couldn't help but shudder as if he had foreseen a terrifying scene. However, he also knew that the situation was urgent and he couldn't afford to let his imagination run wild. He immediately nodded and strode away. At this time, the guests in the banquet hall finally reacted and immediately clamored. "Duchess, is it true that Count Angeli was killed? Duchess, who assassinated Count Angeli? Duchess, will White Dew City fall into the flames of war again?" Question after question shot at her like arrows, but the Duchess only smiled calmly and gestured with her hand. She said calmly, "I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. Distinguished guests, I'm sorry to disturb everyone's mood. But please rest assured, no matter what happens, the House of St. Prospero has the ability to deal with it. Now, please enjoy the delicious food here. Let me go and understand the specific situation, then I'll explain it to you in detail." After saying these, the Duchess no longer cared about the questions in the hall and strode out. Outside the door, the smile on the Duchess' face instantly disappeared, and her expression changed from calm to anxious. Count Angeli was dead. Although she also wanted this terrible Count of the northern frontier to die, he must not die in White Dew Castle. Because if Count Angeli died here, no matter how the House of St. Prospero explained, the whole empire would think that they were the ones who assassinated Count Angeli. Emperor Reinhardt's order of war smoothly arrived in White Dew City, but Count Angeli was assassinated in White Dew City as a guest. How would the royal family punish the House of St. Prospero? The reaction of the northern frontier after hearing this news would give the Duchess a headache. If the young Duke of the northern region was determined to avenge her husband at all costs, then the eastern region would definitely face an extremely terrible crisis. Now that the orcs were about to invade, the royal family and the church, in order to calm the anger of the northern frontier, would most likely join hands to pressure the eastern region. In this case, there must be someone with enough power to take responsibility for Count Angeli's death. The Duchess desperately realized that this person was very likely to be herself. Even if she did not plan to assassinate Count Angeli, for the sake of the overall situation, she, as the Archbishop of the Eastern region and the Duchess of St. Prospero, would most likely be ruthlessly abandoned to appease the northern frontier. Thinking of this, the Duchess immediately realized that this was a trap. A carefully designed trap for her. The person who designed this trap obviously knew the current situation of the Eastern region like the back of his hand. He immediately found the fatal weakness of the current order, and with just a light blow, the stable situation that the Duchess had worked hard to create was in danger of collapsing. The Duchess only felt a chill in her heart. But she quickly took a few deep breaths and forced herself to calm down. The enemy had already made his move, and the Duchess knew that she had no other choice but to take the attack. Now, what she wanted to know the most was who planned all this behind the scenes. Also, what other moves would they make after this? While thinking, the Duchess had already arrived at Colin's room. The room was already surrounded by the guards of the House of St. Prospero, and even Prince Harrison and Princess Judy were blocked outside. "Duchess, why don't you let us in? What happened to teacher?" "Your Highnesses, please forgive the rudeness of these guards. However, the situation inside is a bit complicated. Let me first check it out, then I will explain it to you." After saying this, without waiting for Prince Harrison and Princess Judy to reply, the Duchess strode into the room. Then, she saw Colin lying in a pool of blood. His chest was torn apart, his heart was missing, and the floor was covered in blood. The Duchess did not need to go forward to check to know that this person was completely hopeless. Chapter 485. Did you see the person's face clearly? No, Duchess. He was too fast, I could only see a blur. Then you didn't see anything clearly? The last thing I saw was that person stopping in front of Count Angeli's corpse. From the back, it should be a middle-aged man about 1.9 meters tall. Blonde hair, and the scabbard of the knight's sword at his waist. I think it was purple. The Duchess listened to the guards rambling for a long time, but she didn't get any useful information. Her expression started to become impatient. The guard obviously noticed this and hurriedly racked his brains. Then, he added with some uncertainty, "That's not right." He then added, "Duchess, I think I saw that person rushing out of Prince Harrison's residence. Are you sure?" The Duchess' expression changed and she hurriedly asked, "It should be." The guard became hesitant again. The Duchess was a little disappointed, but she still walked out. She found Prince Harrison, who was waiting anxiously outside, and asked, "Your Highness Harrison, a guard said that he saw the murderer rushing out from your residence. Did you notice anyone suspicious?" Prince Harrison only hesitated for a moment, and then immediately said, "Duchess, Prince Archway appeared in my room, and then he rushed out for no reason. Then, I heard that teacher was attacked by an assassin." "Duchess, teacher, he couldn't have been killed, right?" Prince Archway. The Duchess was shocked by this name. This paladin of the San Lorenzo family actually appeared in White Dew City, and even killed Count Angeli. This made the Duchess a little confused for a moment. It must be known that although Prince Rhy was born into the royal San Lorenzo family, he actually sided with the church. So, why would he come to White Dew Castle to kill someone for no reason? Furthermore, Prince Rhy didn't have any grudges with Count Angeli. Seeing the Duchess standing there in a daze, Prince Harrison asked again, "Duchess, what happened to teacher?" The Duchess knew that this matter couldn't be hidden, so she sighed and said, "Count Angeli has already been killed by an assassin. No, that's impossible. How could teacher die so easily? He's a grade 6 knight." Prince Harrison kept shaking his head. He couldn't accept this result at all. The teacher who had created miraculous results time and time again had died just like that? Princess Judy also burst into tears. She yelled and tried to run into the room, but was stopped by the guards. After hearing Prince Harrison's words, the Duchess realized something. Indeed, Colin Angeli was a rank 6 knight. Apart from a paladin like Prince Lacey, who else could kill him so easily? But she still couldn't figure out Prince Leahy's motive. At this moment, Knight Warren came to the Duchess' side again and reported softly, "Madam, it's my fault. I failed to stop the Northern Frontier Guards who followed Count Angeli into the city. They escaped." "What?" The Duchess raised her eyebrows and said angrily, "You can't even stop those few people?" Knight Warren felt aggrieved and said in a muffled voice, "Madam, although there aren't many of them, all of them are professionals. There are even 2 6th-order warriors among them. We can't stop them at all." 2 6th-order warriors. The Duchess' voice changed. She knew that even the House of St. Prospero didn't have 2 6th-order warriors. Was the Angeli family so extravagant that they had 6th-order warriors as guards? And 2 of them? However, the worst news was yet to come. Knight Warren continued to report, "Also, when we chased the Northern Frontier Guards to the North Gate, we found that the gate was open. I suspect that someone in the city deliberately opened the gate for them." The Duchess felt a chill in her heart and immediately asked, "Which family's army was originally stationed at the North Gate?" "It was the Nickel family's army." "Count Nickel?" The Duchess suddenly thought of the previous banquet, when Count Nickel shouted about the assassination of Count Angeli. Originally, she thought that Count Nickel just couldn't help but exclaim after hearing such shocking news, but now it seemed that the old man did it on purpose. At that time, Count Nickel might not have heard Knight Warren's report at all, but he already knew that Count Angeli would be assassinated. This Count Nickel was an accomplice in this assassination. "Where's Count Nickel?" The Duchess gritted her teeth and asked. Knight Warren also realized something and immediately said, "I'll go find him now." The Duchess stopped Knight Warren and ordered with a gloomy face, "Don't waste time. If Count Nickel really betrayed the House of St. Prospero, he should have escaped from White Dew Castle by now. Go immediately mobilize the Pegasus Legion and control the 4 gates. Don't let the Blood Cavalry enter the city." "Yes." In the banquet hall, a group of nobles was still talking about the assassination of Count Angeli. However, some people had already left in advance when no one was paying attention. For example, Count Nickel and Beatrice. She didn't go to the place where Colin was assassinated, but went straight to Marquis Vincent's room. "Madame Beatrice, is the Marquis awake?" "Not yet. You can leave first." Since the Marquis was still in the banquet hall, after the maids left, only Marquis Vincent and Beatrice were left in the room. "And what's wrong?" Marquis Vincent opened his eyes and asked in confusion. "Colin is dead," Beatrice said. "Really?" Marquis Vincent sat up from the bed in surprise. "Aunt, you've succeeded? What about Mother? Did you kill her too?" Beatrice shook her head and said, "No, I didn't have time to do anything. Colin Angeli was killed by someone else." Marquis Vincent was stunned for a moment and asked after a while, "Who killed him?" "I don't know." "Then, have you been to the scene?" "Not yet. What's wrong?" Marquis Vincent's face changed greatly. He immediately grabbed Beatrice's arm and said in a hurry, "No, you must cut off his head. You must cut off his head." Beatrice frowned and asked in confusion, "Why do you have to cut off his head?" "Because if you don't cut off his head, he will come to you." A drifting voice suddenly came from outside the window. Marquis Vincent suddenly froze, as if he was petrified, but his face showed an extremely frightened expression. Chapter 486. "Duchess, you should at least let us go in and collect my teacher's body," Prince Harrison said in a deep voice. He finally showed the dignity of the first heir of the royal family. Duchess hesitated for a second and nodded. "Your Highnesses, I understand your feelings. Of course, I can let you go in and say goodbye to Count Angeli. However, since the murderer of Count Angeli hasn't been found yet, please don't touch his body for the time being." Duchess waved her hand to the guards after she finished. Prince Harrison immediately held his weeping sister's hand and strode in. However, after entering the room, Prince Harrison only saw the blood on the floor. His teacher's body was nowhere to be found. In his confusion, Prince Harrison walked around the room and searched every nook and cranny, but he still couldn't find Colin's body. "Brother, where is my teacher?" Princess Judy was also confused. She even forgot to continue crying. "I don't know." Prince Harrison frowned and walked out of the room. "Where is my teacher's body?" "Gone?" The guard at the door was also confused. However, when he entered the room, he was shocked to find that the body was indeed gone. The guard quickly went to inform Duchess. Duchess was also panicked. She thought that someone had stolen the body. Although she couldn't understand why, she still ordered the guards to search the room. The assassination of Count Angeli was strange from the beginning to the end. The Duchess couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. However, she didn't have the time to think about the secrets hidden in Count Angeli's death, because a messenger hurriedly ran to report to her. "Duchess, Knight Warren asked me to inform you that the Nickel family has betrayed us. At this time, they have occupied the North Gate and are attacking the approaching Sky Horse Legion." Duchess only felt that her hands and feet were cold and her heart was trembling. The worst situation had happened. She calmed herself down and asked, "What about the Blood Cavalry? Have they entered the city?" "Not yet." "Not yet." Duchess was happy, but she still couldn't believe it. The Blood Cavalry didn't do anything in the camp outside the city. It seems that they didn't receive the news of Count Angeli's death. The Duchess was a little bewildered. Just now, Knight Warren clearly said that he didn't stop the group of guards that Colin Angeli brought into the city, so those guards who escaped would definitely inform the Blood Cavalry that Earl Angeli was assassinated. Why didn't the Bloody Cavalry take any action now? What's more, Count Nicole led his army to occupy the North Gate. It was obvious that he wanted to let the Bloody Cavalry, who would definitely go crazy because of the death of Colin Angelo, enter the city and launch a bloody revenge against the House of St. Prospero. But why didn't things go according to the script? The Duchess didn't know what went wrong with the enemy's plan, but she immediately realized that this was the perfect opportunity for her. As long as they took back the North City Gate and blocked the Bloody Cavalry outside the city, the situation of the White Dew City would not be irreversible. Thinking of this, the Duchess no longer hesitated and immediately strode out. But seeing this, Prince Harrison hurriedly shouted, "Duchess, why are you leaving just like that? Where was teacher's body? What about the murderer of the teacher?" The Duchess didn't care about a dead person at this time. She didn't stop walking and said perfunctorily, "Your Highness Harrison, of course I won't leave Earl Angeli alone. I'm going to deploy a more detailed search. So, please wait here patiently, I'll inform you as soon as I have any progress." After that, the Duchess left in a hurry. Princess Judy pitifully pulled Prince Harrison's arm and asked while sobbing, "Brother, is teacher really dead?" Prince Harrison looked at the back of the Duchess, but slowly shook his head and said, "How could teacher die so easily?" "Really?" Princess Judy smiled through her tears and asked in surprise. Prince Harrison tightly pursed his lips and said in a serious voice, "Anyway, I won't believe it until I see teacher's body with my own eyes." Princess Judy also nodded, "Well, I don't believe that teacher is dead either." "You're really not dead." Beatrice looked at Colin, who climbed in through the window with a shocked face. "How could I die so easily?" Colin smiled as he slowly approached. The terrifying bloody hole in his chest hadn't completely healed, and she could even see the crushed heart hanging there like a deflated balloon. But Colin acted as if nothing had happened. As he walked, he pointed at his own head and said meaningfully, "That's right. Didn't Marquis Vincent tell you? If you want to kill me, you have to cut off my head." Beatrice's eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she saw. She muttered as she retreated, "Devil. You're a devil, devil?" The corner of Colin's mouth rose as he continued to approach Beatrice. He said, "Why can't I be an oracle?" "Oracle?" Beatrice stopped retreating and seemed to understand something. "Are you a god's chosen one?" Without waiting for Colin to answer, Beatrice seemed to have realized something and immediately said, "That's right, you must be a chosen. Otherwise, how could a small family like Angeli have such a talented person like you? How could you have such an almost immortal ability? Lord Chosen, what kind of mission did you bring to this world? I wonder if I have the honor of being able to contribute even the tiniest bit to your grand plan?" With that, the expression on Beatrice's face became extremely pious. She slowly crawled in front of Colin and tried to kiss his toes. Colin raised his eyebrows. Obviously, he didn't expect this woman to change so quickly. Just as he was about to deceive her, his expression suddenly froze. Asterisk swoosh. Asterisk Beatrice, who was originally crawling on the ground, suddenly stood up. The silver dagger in her right hand was like a viper coming out of its hole, stabbing toward Colin's neck. However, the dagger was caught by a large hand midway. "You overestimate yourself." Colin sneered. Beatrice's expression didn't change. Her eyes were full of determination, and there was no longer any reverence and piety from before. She quickly kicked up her right leg, and at the same time, her left hand stabbed toward the bloody hole in Colin's chest. However, the difference in strength between the two was too great. Even if Colin was seriously injured at this moment, although the damage to his heart was not fatal, it still made him weak. Even so, with the strength of a fourth-grade knight, it was still difficult for Beatrice to threaten Colin. Cut. Colin closed his legs and clamped Beatrice's insidious leg. At the same time, his right hand grabbed her wrist, and he used so much strength that he almost crushed Beatrice's wrist bones. The distance between the two was very close, and their posture was quite ambiguous, but in fact, they were engaged in an extremely dangerous life and death battle. Beatrice was indeed a fierce woman. Even if her hands and feet were restrained, she still refused to give up. She swung her head and fiercely hit Colin's nose. Holy light surged on Colin's face, and the dense golden lines quickly formed a mask-like shield. This hit, Colin was safe and sound, but Beatrice's face was covered with blood and she was dizzy. Colin sneered and bit Beatrice's slender neck without hesitation. Chapter 487. Looking at his aunt and Colin hugging each other in an ambiguous posture, Marquis Vincent could only feel a bone-deep fear. In fact, Marquis Vincent found himself unable to control his body after hearing Colin's voice. When Beatrice and Colin were fighting for their lives, Marquis Vincent wanted to help, but he couldn't move at all. Boundless fear shrouded him. This was a reaction that came from the depths of his bloodline, as if he had met his natural enemy. He couldn't overcome it with willpower. In just a short while, Marquis Vincent was completely drenched, as if he had just been fished out of the water. Bang. Colin threw Beatrice to the ground without any pity and turned to look at Marquis Vincent with a dazzling smile. However, this smile was the most terrifying thing in the world in Marquis Vincent's eyes. Marquis Vincent, do you really want my head that badly? Do. Marquis Vincent tried his best to open his mouth, but he couldn't form a complete sentence. Colin looked at all of this and was a little surprised at the terrifying suppression he had over his blood kin. This suppression seemed to have surpassed the difference in strength between the two. One had to know that even if Marquis Vincent wasn't as strong as him, he shouldn't be acting so unbearably. It seemed that even if his bloodline was stronger than him, he wouldn't be able to resist him under the suppression of his bloodline. Unfortunately, being unable to resist physically didn't mean that he would be mentally submissive. Marquis Vincent had indeed betrayed him. Although Colin was mentally prepared for this, he still felt disappointed and angry. This also meant that all of his bloodline could betray him. Of course, this was actually very reasonable. After all, bloodline descendants had self-awareness. Betrayal was almost an inevitable byproduct of self-awareness. However, Colin wasn't too worried. Marquis Vincent's betrayal was mainly due to the great conflict of interest between the two of them. The other bloodline descendants, such as Queen Aisha, were completely bound to Colin's interests, not to mention that she had already given birth to a daughter for Colin. Under such circumstances, Queen Aisha wouldn't betray Colin even if she wasn't tied down by the vampires. Knight Siar was willing to become Colin's blood subordinate at the beginning, and now the bloody cavalry had been completely controlled by Colin, so Knight Siar, whose life value was bound to the bloody cavalry, would naturally not betray them. Vala probably wouldn't either. After all, it was Colin who helped him take back the Oman family's title, and Colin's sister was also married to him. She wouldn't betray him unless something unexpected happened. Countess Schultz, on the other hand, didn't have much of a conflict of interest with Colin, and Colin had caused her to lose her husband. It was impossible for her not to resent Colin at all. Although she was very obedient and gentle to Colin when they were in Swan Castle, he was afraid that she was just trying to please him. He didn't know what she was thinking in the dark. Thinking of this, Colin also reminded himself, don't blindly trust the blood descendants. They weren't like those blood slaves who didn't have self-awareness and could completely obey Colin's will. While Colin was deep in thought, Marquis Vincent felt as if a year had passed. He kept making meaningless growls, as if he had a lot to say to Colin. Colin came back to his senses and slightly restrained his aura. Marquis Vincent finally caught his breath. He climbed down from the bed on all fours and crawled in front of Colin. His forehead was firmly pressed against Colin's feet as he said, "Lord blessed, please forgive my foolish actions from before. As long as you are willing to give me another chance, I will definitely follow your orders without any hesitation." Colin smiled in a non-committal manner and asked, "Yes. Tell me, what's your plan?" Marquis Vincent hurriedly explained his and Beatrice's plan in full detail. Of course, he unsurprisingly pushed all the responsibility to Beatrice, and he himself was only forced to cooperate. Colin rubbed his chin and asked doubtfully, "So, you didn't contact Mr. Chi?" "Mr. Chi?" Marquis Vincent was stunned. "Are you talking about the surviving member of the Saint Thean family? But wasn't he killed by Prince Rhy long ago?" Colin saw that Marquis Vincent's doubts didn't seem to be fake and immediately understood. There was probably another faction in the city. Seeing that Colin was deep in thought again, Marquis Vincent carefully raised his head and explained softly, "My lord, the reason why I pretended to be unconscious wasn't because I didn't want to follow your orders. It was because White Dew City was under my mother's control, and she actually wanted to kill me. Helpless, I had no choice but to pretend to be dead." "Is that so?" Colin thought for a moment and understood the Duchess' motive for wanting to kill her son. It seemed like she really was a sinister woman who would do anything to achieve her goals. "So, you had the time to urge Beatrice to chop off my head, but you didn't have the ability to contact me and tell me about the situation in White Dew City, right?" Faced with Colin's questioning, Marquis Vincent was so frightened that he prostrated himself on the ground again and said in an incomparably self-reproachful tone, "My lord, I also realize that my actions were extremely stupid and could even be called blasphemy. As long as you are willing to forgive my sins, I will become your most loyal servant and control the entire eastern region for you." "Loyalty?" Colin sneered and said, "This thing is like a young girl's chastity. Once lost, it can never be found again." After saying this, without waiting for Marquis Vincent's explanation, Colin's palm quickly reached out and pressed on Marquis Vincent's head like lightning. Then, Marquis Vincent was lifted up by Colin as if he was a defenseless doll. When the two were at eye level, Colin quietly stared into Marquis Vincent's terrified eyes and said indifferently, "Do you know? You will only die after your head is chopped off. This is actually a characteristic of blood thralls. As for me, I don't know if I will die after my head is chopped off. Also, will a bloodline die? But since you are so curious, I will experiment on you." After saying this, Colin forcefully twisted his hand. Marquis Vincent's head was twisted off. Marquis Vincent's headless body softly fell to the ground and twitched a few times before it stopped moving. Colin observed for a while and was indeed unable to sense the other party's vital signs. "So, a bloodline will also die without a head," Colin muttered to himself. It seemed that he would be the same as well. Casually throwing away Marquis Vincent's head, Colin walked to the window and looked out. Tonight, White Dew City was destined to not be peaceful. Shouts, screams, and flames all indicated that this would be a night of bloodshed. However, this had little to do with Colin. Although someone had tried to drag the blood cavalry into the water before, how could Colin be fooled? Those blood thralls who escaped did not bring back the news of his assassination, but his order to prohibit the blood cavalry from entering the city. In short, he was ready to watch a good show tonight. Colin spread his wings and rushed into the dark night. Just after he left, Beatrice, who was lying on the ground, slowly opened her eyes. But her eyes had completely lost their original quickness and brilliance, becoming dull and even dead. Chapter 488. The area near the north gate of White Dew City had become a meat mill. Countless soldiers of the Sky Horse Legion rushed up one after another, trying to regain control of the north gate. However, the army of the Nickel family firmly occupied the gate tower and repelled the attacks of the Sky Horse Legion again and again. Although the Sky Horse Legion was in the city at this time, to recapture the North Gate Tower was no less than a siege battle. It was ironic. Under such circumstances, the Sky Horse Legion would leave behind countless corpses for every step they took. A dense rain of arrows continued to fall from the top of the city, shooting down the soldiers of the Sky Horse Legion one by one. If it were not for the military judge at the back, the rebuilt Sky Horse Legion would have been defeated and fled. However, the army of the Nickel family on the opposite side was not having a good time either. They were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, and this battle was inexplicable. Many soldiers did not know why they were fighting with the Sky Horse Legion, and they were all in a trance. Therefore, the two sides were like chickens pecking at each other. For a while, they were evenly matched, and it was hard to tell who was worse. On the gate tower, the Earl of Avon looked at the direction of the camp of the blood cavalry outside the city, and he became more and more anxious. What's going on? Didn't the guards of the northern frontier just escape? Why is the blood cavalry not moving? Earl Nickel opened his mouth, but he did not know how to answer this question. He had a bad feeling in his heart, but he also knew that he had no way out now. He could only follow the Earl of Avon to the end. The Earl of Avon stared at the darkness in the distance, as if he wanted to see the situation in the camp of the blood cavalry through the darkness. However, it was obviously in vain. The dark night shrouded everything in an unknown fog. The Earl of Avon was doomed to rely on guessing to determine the possible movements of the blood cavalry. After a long silence, the Earl of Avon's expression changed and he suddenly said, "Do you think we have overestimated the status of Colin Angeli in the blood cavalry?" Earl Nickel was stunned and said, "You mean, the blood cavalry does not care about the life and death of Colin Angeli?" The Earl of Avon's eyes were shining as if he had seen through everything. Think about it carefully. Colin Angeli has only taken over the bloody cavalry for more than a year. In such a short time, no matter how powerful he is, it is impossible for him to completely remove the brand left by Marquis Garcia. We've always mistakenly thought that Colin Angeli was the soul of this army, but what if he's just an ostensible commander, and the real commander is someone else? Count Nickel rubbed his chin and nodded in agreement. That is indeed a possibility. After all, the Angeli family was just a small baron, and they could not afford to raise a cavalry. Colin Angeli knew nothing about cavalry before he met Marquis Garcia. Then, how could he become a genius cavalry commander after following Marquis Garcia to the Sky Icefield? So, it is very likely that he is not the commander of the bloody cavalry all the time. Not only is he not the commander, but the bloody cavalry does not really belong to Colin Angeli. The Earl of Avon added, with excitement in his words, Marquis Garcia or the House of St. Hilda is the real owner of this cavalry. So, when the news of Colin Angeli's death spread out, the bloody cavalry did not come to the city to avenge him as we expected. This undoubtedly shows that the bloody cavalry is not really loyal to Colin Angeli. So, when he died, the bloody cavalry did not go crazy, but wanted to retreat. Then what should we do? Earl Nickel frowned and did not know what to do. If the bloody cavalry does not enter the city, the army of the Nickel family alone cannot stop the Sky Horse Troop. The Earl of Avon's eyes flashed with dangerous light and said coldly, if the bloody cavalry does not enter the city, we will lure them in. How? Of course, we will create more chaos. More chaos? The Earl of Avon's face became a little ferocious. The bloody cavalry is not moving now, which means that they are also hesitating. Even if they are not really loyal to Colin Angeli, he is the Earl of the Empire, the guardian of the northern frontier, and the husband of the Duke of St. Hilda. His identity is very noble. He died in the White Dew City. If the bloody cavalry just left, they would not be able to face the accountability of the Duke of St. Hilda. So, they really want to enter the city, but they are afraid that it will be another trap like last time. Then we will make the city really chaotic, so that the bloody cavalry will completely dispel their doubts and rush in. Earl Nickel opened his eyes wide and reminded hesitantly, Earl of Avon, don't you worry that the situation will be completely out of control? So what? The Earl of Avon replied without hesitation, I will not hesitate to turn the White Dew City into ruins. Earl Nickel looked at the Earl of Avon in horror, as if he had a new understanding of the second son of the Duke of the Eastern region. The Earl of Avon smiled faintly and said indifferently, Why are you so excited? It is not the first time that the White Dew City has been turned into ruins. Furthermore, after the previous destruction, the rebuilt White Dew City had become even bigger and more prosperous. Presumably, the next time it was rebuilt, it would only be better. Just like a phoenix reborn in fire, destruction is to welcome a new life. Now the Eastern region needs such a new life. Earl Nickel was silent for a long time, and his eyes finally became firm, as if he had made up his mind. He asked, Earl of Avon, how do you plan to make the White Dew City really chaotic? I am afraid that the army of the Nickel family alone is not enough, right? The Earl of Avon took a deep breath, looked at the castle standing in the center of the White Dew City, and said in a deep voice, I want to go to the White Dew Castle myself. Earl Nickel's expression changed, and he advised, Earl of Avon, it is not a good idea for you to go back to the White Dew Castle at this time. I have to go. The Earl of Avon's eyes were firm. You also know that the Nickel family alone cannot make the whole White Dew City chaotic. I have to win the support of more lords of the Eastern region. As long as their army in the city is on our side, it is possible to suppress the Pegasus Legion. So I have to go. You don't have to worry about me. At this time, Mother is in a terrible state because of Colin Angelo's death. She may not have the time to take care of me. Earl Nickel reminded him again. Earl of Avon, even if the Duchess does not have time to take care of you at this time, if you enter the White Dew Castle alone, how confident are you that you can persuade the lords to follow you? The Earl of Avon smiled confidently. I don't have much confidence, But what if the two highnesses are involved? The two highnesses? Earl Nichols' eyes lit up. You mean Prince Harrison and Princess Judy? Yes. Colin Angelo was their teacher. As long as I can see them, it is not difficult to make them blame the mistress of the White Dew Castle for their teacher's death. What's more, the royal family has always been on the opposite side of the church. If I promise to draw a clear line between the eastern region and the church, then do you think the two highnesses will help me deal with Mother? With the support of Prince Harrison and Princess Judy, if I stand out and persuade the lords of the eastern region, I have a 70% to 80% chance of success. Earl Nichol nodded, but his face was still worried. It does make sense, but the risk is great. What is there without risk? The Earl of Avon said firmly, if I miss this opportunity, I will never be the Duke of the Eastern region. Earl Nichol gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice, Good. I will arrange for someone to escort you away. Chapter 489. White Dew Castle, Banquet Hall. Melodious music, delicious food, beautiful maids. None of these could calm the restless hearts of the guests. The news of Earl Angeli's death had already made people anxious. Later, they heard the sound of fighting in the city, which made them even more anxious. They thought that the blood cavalry was coming to the city to avenge Earl Angeli. They were so scared that they were ready to leave. The steward of the House of St. Prospero tried to persuade them to stay, but it was useless. These nobles of the eastern region didn't want to stay in White Dew Castle and wait for the blood cavalry to come in and be buried with the House of St. Prospero, so they were determined to leave. However, when they hurried to the gate of White Dew Castle, they found that the gate was tightly closed, and a group of heavily armed guards blocked the gate. The guests suddenly clamored and asked to open the gate to let them leave. But the guards didn't move at all. It seemed that they had received a clear order to prohibit them from leaving. Who let you block the gate? Is the House of St. Prospero going to kill all the nobles of the eastern region? Where is the Duchess? We want to see her. I'm here. Seeing that the situation was in danger of getting out of control, the Duchess finally came out. The chaotic scene suddenly became quiet. A nobleman of the eastern region immediately stood up and asked, Duchess, why do you forbid us to leave White Dew Castle? The Duchess didn't answer this question but asked, Why are you in such a hurry to leave? This kind of question seemed to irritate the nobles, and suddenly someone shouted, Duchess, why do you ask? The House of St. Prospero didn't have the ability to protect the safety of the guests in White Dew Castle, which led to the assassination of Count Angeli. Now the blood cavalry is going to avenge Count Angeli. Do we still want to stay here and wait for death? The blood cavalry didn't enter the city. The Duchess said lightly. This sentence made the nobles of the eastern region stunned, but soon, doubts appeared on their faces. Apparently they thought that the Duchess was deliberately deceiving them. Duchess, you said that the blood cavalry didn't enter the city, then what's the fierce fighting outside? That's because Count Nicole betrayed the eastern region. He's fighting with the Sky Horse Legion. It has nothing to do with the bloody cavalry. Count Nicole? Betrayal? The nobles of the eastern region suddenly whispered to each other, obviously not expecting such a situation. The Duchess took the opportunity to continue. That's right. You don't need to worry about the blood cavalry. Although the news of Count Angeli's death has been spread out, the blood cavalry's camp is still quiet. Obviously, the generals of the bloody cavalry were sensible people, and they would not act irrationally under impulse. Some people wanted to use the death of Count Angeli to sow discord between the St. Pros family and the blood cavalry, and even the relationship between the St. Pros family and the blood cavalry. Their intentions were extremely sinister, but not everyone would be fooled. We, the House of St. Prospero, are responsible for Count Angeli's death, and will do everything we can to make it up to him. However, the orcs are invading and we need to work together. We can't fight among ourselves anymore. I believe that the bloody cavalry will also understand this point. So, your worries are unnecessary. The riot in the White Dew City was provoked by the Nicol family, and the situation is under the control of the Sky Horse Legion. You don't need to be so nervous. After these words, the expressions of the guests were obviously relaxed. They had all witnessed the terrible fighting power of the Blood Cavalry, and they had already been traumatized. However, if the Blood Cavalry did not attack the city, they would not be so scared. The rebellion of the Nickel family? It was not easy to calm down. However, there was also a hostage who asked, "Duchess, since the Sky Horse Legion can control the situation in the city, why are you so nervous to close the White Dew Castle and prohibit people from entering and leaving?" The Duchess glanced at the noble who spoke, and her face became gloomy. She said coldly, "Of course, to prevent the murderer of Count Angeli from leaving the White Dew Castle." This was a dignified reason. The guests did not know that Colin was already a 6th grade knight, or they would definitely shout that they were wronged. To be able to assassinate a 6th grade knight, one should at least have the strength of a 5th grade knight, or they would not be able to get close to him. However, 5th grade knights were not cabbages, and there were only a few of them here. After the crowd quieted down, the Duchess opened her mouth again. "Next, I will personally ask you about your whereabouts tonight. If I offend you, please forgive me. I believe that you all want to find the murderer of Count Angeli as soon as possible." Seeing that no one objected, the Duchess was about to start the questioning, but she saw a guard running to her in a hurry, and he could not hide the panic on his face. The Duchess could not help but feel angry in her heart. There were too many unexpected situations tonight, and she was already in a terrible situation. She did not want to see any more accidents. But unfortunately, the accidents still came. The guard looked at the Duchess's fierce eyes, walked to her, and reported in a low voice, "Madam, Marquis Vincent, he unfortunately passed away." Hearing this, the Duchess was relieved. Marquis Vincent's death was within her expectation. No, it was within her plan. Of course, on the surface, she immediately put on a grief-stricken face and said to the crowd with sobs, "Everyone, I'm really sorry. Vincent did not make it. He just passed away from his injuries." After hearing this, the guests were stunned for a moment, but they also quickly comforted her. But the guard on the side was dumbfounded. He hesitated for a moment, but still reminded her in a low voice, "Madam, I'm afraid the Marquis did not pass away from his injuries, but was just killed by someone." The Duchess's pupils shrank, and she coldly stared at the guard and scolded, "Do you know what you are saying?" The guard wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and nodded, "Madam, I dare not speak nonsense, but the Marquis' head was twisted off." The Duchess's expression changed, and she immediately walked to Marquis Vincent's room. The guests were left in a daze, and they looked at each other. The Duchess walked to Marquis Vincent's room with a gloomy face, and as expected, she saw her son's decapitated corpse. Although she wanted Marquis Vincent to die, she did not want him to die in such a way. What happened at that time? The Duchess's voice was as cold as ice. The guard trembled as he replied, "Madam, at that time, the guards outside the house had already been killed. When the patrols in the castle found that something was wrong and pushed the door open, they saw that the Marquis had already been killed." "Oh, right, Madame Beatrice was also in the room at that time, and she was also killed." Only then did the Duchess notice Beatrice's existence, and a pleased sneer appeared at the corner of her mouth, but it quickly disappeared. She slowly walked to Marquis Vincent's corpse, ready to check the situation. But just as the Duchess squatted down, she suddenly felt a strong sense of danger behind her. She suddenly turned around and saw Beatrice, who should have been dead, pouncing on her. The dagger in her hand shone with a cold light. Chapter 490. Knight Andy felt that his authority had been offended. Of course, to be more precise, it should be the authority of His Majesty Reinhardt. But in his opinion, since he came to White Dew City with His Majesty Reinhardt's war order, there should be no more internal strife. Instead, he should immediately start preparing to send troops to support the western region. However, the sound of fighting still rang out in White Dew City. It was as if His Majesty Reinhardt's war order was just a piece of waste paper. "Your Highness Harrison, it's time for you to stand up and show the eastern region the majesty of the royal family. Otherwise, I don't know how this farce will end." Knight Andy stood in front of Prince Harrison and encouraged him. Prince Harrison was a little hesitant. After a moment of silence, he said, "Cousin Andy, you are the messenger sent by Father to the eastern region. In this situation, Shouldn't you go and show the majesty of the royal family? Knight Andy suddenly choked. In fact, he had just tried to show the majesty of the royal family to the Eastern region people, but unfortunately, the Eastern region people didn't take him seriously. On the surface, they kept saying that they would exercise restraint and would never violate His Majesty Reinhardt's war order. But in fact, the Eastern region people were fighting fiercely again. Therefore, Knight Andy had no choice but to come to Prince Harrison for help. Your Highness Harrison, after all, I am not a direct descendant of the San Lorenzo family. Those hateful Eastern region people don't take me seriously. But you are different. You are the eldest son of His Majesty, the first heir to the throne of the empire. As long as you show up, the Eastern region people won't dare to mess around. Seeing that Prince Harrison was still hesitating, Knight Andy said, Your Highness, don't you want to find out the truth about the assassination of your teacher, Count Angeli? This time, Prince Harrison was finally moved. He asked, Cousin Andy, what do you think I should do? Seeing this, Knight Andy was finally relieved. At the same time, he had a better understanding of Count Angeli's position in Prince Harrison's heart. Therefore, he couldn't help but think that if Count Angeli hadn't been assassinated, with Prince Harrison's respect and trust, his future would be limitless. What a pity! Getting rid of these useless thoughts, Knight Andy quickly suggested. Your Highness Harrison, I believe that the current chaos in White Dew City is due to the lack of a powerful leader. After the death of the Duke of St. Prospero, although the Duchess became the mistress of the city on the surface, she was obviously unable to control the situation, and she probably had ulterior motives. After all, the Duchess was the Archbishop of the Eastern region. She was hostile to the royal family. Maybe she was the one behind all this. She wanted to deliberately resist His Majesty's war order. Therefore, we must find a new master of the Eastern region who can replace the Duchess, and use him to stabilize the current situation, unify the forces of the Eastern region, and respond to His Majesty's war order. Prince Harrison nodded and asked, Who do you think is more suitable? If Marquis Vincent is safe and sound, he would naturally be the first choice. But now that he is bedridden with serious injuries, I don't know if he can make it. So, it can't be him. As for the other son and daughter of the Duke of St. Prospero, they were not in White Dew Castle, so they were not considered. Among the remaining St. Prospero, I think Knight Ivan is the most suitable. Because he is the younger brother of Governor Emason, he has good prestige and connections in the house of St. Prospero, and he is mature and prudent. He also has a good impression of the royal family. Wait! Prince Harrison interrupted. The right of succession to the Duke of the Eastern region is not Knight Ivan's turn, right? Knight Andy smiled and explained, Your Highness, we are not helping the Duke of the Eastern region choose a successor. We only need a temporary leader who can stabilize the current situation. As for the new Duke of the Eastern region, if he wants to be officially conferred by His Majesty, I am afraid he will have to wait until the invasion of the orcs is repelled. Prince Harrison pondered for a while and finally nodded. Well, do you know where Knight Ivan is? I want to see him first. Knight Andy looked happy and hurriedly said, I just met him on the road. I will help you see him. After that he hurriedly left. After a while, Knight Andy and Knight Ivan came together. Prince Harrison immediately narrowed his eyes. Although he was young and immature, he was not stupid. Moreover, he had grown up in the royal family and had seen many politicians with different thoughts. He had also been influenced by Colin's many conspiracies and machinations. How could he not understand by now? Knight Andy and Knight Ivan had already colluded. Of course, Prince Harrison wasn't angry. He remembered his mother once said, Don't expect the people below to have no ulterior motives. What you need to do is to use their ulterior motives and make them serve your purpose. Your Royal Highness, Prince Harrison, please allow me to express my sincerest apologies on behalf of the House of St. Prospero. The current situation in White Dew City. It's really terrible. Prince Harrison straightened his back, imitated his father, and said in a deep voice, That's why we need a strong leader to stand up, stabilize the people, and quell the unrest. Knight Ivan perked up and instantly understood Prince Harrison's meaning. He hurriedly bowed and said, Your Highness, You are absolutely right. If you don't mind my stupidity, I'm willing to do my best to help you stabilize the current situation. Prince Harrison did not immediately nod. Instead, he asked, Knight Ivan, are you confident? Your Highness, I'll let you know that among the 5 commanders of the Pegasus Legion, one of them is the son-in-law of my brother, Governor Emason, and the other one is my good-for-nothing son. Knight Ivan said in a proud tone, but then he immediately showed a humble smile and said, Your Highness, I'll let you know. As for the other 3 commanders, as long as Your Highness makes an appearance, I believe you will be able to make them understand what the overall situation is. Prince Harrison took a deep look at Knight Ivan, then nodded and said, Yes. All right, if you can stabilize the situation in White Dew City and help me find the murderer of Count Angeli, I can agree on behalf of my father to let you temporarily take over the authority of the Eastern region. Knight Ivan suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and solemnly knelt down on one knee. Thank you for your trust in me, Your Highness. Then, Knight Ivan immediately said, Your Highness Harrison, our top priority is to control the situation in White Dew Castle first. And the key figure is the captain of the guards of White Dew Castle, Knight Warren. This person is the guardian knight of the Duchess and is also a fanatic of the church. I'm afraid it will be more troublesome. I suggest you meet with him first. If this person is stubborn, then we must not be soft-hearted. Looking at the murderous Knight Ivan, Prince Harrison's heart trembled. Only then did he realize that he was about to participate in a bloody seizure of power, and there was no room for mercy or hesitation. He took a deep breath and was about to ask in detail when he saw a guard running over in a panic and reporting to Knight Ivan, Sir Ivan, it's bad. Madame Beatrice went crazy and killed Marquis Vincent and the Duchess. Knight Ivan was stunned at first, but instead of being shocked, he was overjoyed and immediately said to Prince Harrison, Your Highness, this is a heaven-sent opportunity. Prince Harrison's entire body quivered, and after coming to his senses, he immediately said, That's right. Good. Then let's do it. Chapter 491. The news of the Duchess' death swept through White Dew Castle like a whirlwind. Everywhere it went, the crowd was shocked and panicked, not knowing what to do. Especially the nobles of the eastern region gathered at the gate of White Dew Castle. They were shocked and began to worry about their own safety. First, Count Angeli was assassinated, then Marquis Vincent was killed, and now even the Duchess was not spared. In their eyes, White Dew Castle had become an extremely dangerous place, and they could no longer suppress their desire to escape. Please open the gate and let us leave. That's right, since the House of St. Prospero can't guarantee the stability and safety of White Dew Castle, what right do you have to forcibly detain us? I want to leave today, let's see who dares to stop me. The guards didn't know what to do when they saw the agitated nobles trying to force their way in. The captain of the White Dew Castle Guards, Knight Warren, also went to check the situation as soon as he heard the news of the Duchess' death. Knight Warren wasn't there, and the news of the Duchess' death made the guards panic, so they didn't dare to stop the nobles who rushed up. They could only let them forcibly open the gate and leave. Outside the gate, the nobles finally relaxed, but before they could go far, they saw a figure standing in the middle of the street, seemingly waiting for them. Earl of Avon? Distinguished guests, is the House of St. Prospero not a good host? Why are you in such a hurry to leave? The Earl of Avon asked with a smile. The nobles of the eastern region looked at each other, and then one of the viscounts stood up and said, My Lord Count, it's not that we don't want to stay in White Dew Castle, but there are some problems inside the House of St. Prospero. In order to avoid more chaos and unnecessary misunderstandings, we decided to leave first. Problems? What's the problem in White Dew Castle? The nobles then recounted all the deaths that had occurred in White Dew Castle. After listening, the Earl of Avon's face didn't show any joy or anger, but he said indifferently, Everyone, the St. Prost family has indeed encountered some difficulties, but don't tell me you intend to leave just because of this? Have you all forgotten the oath of allegiance you once swore? Such a question immediately caused a commotion among the nobles of the eastern region. Some people were ashamed, some didn't think much of it, and there were also some who remained silent and pretended not to hear it. Count Elvin's gaze slowly swept across the faces of the nobles of the eastern region, taking in their expressions. He wasn't disappointed or angry, because he knew very well that loyalty was actually like a gorgeous vase. Usually it could be used to put on a facade, but when the Real storm came, it would often fall and become a mess. However, not all flower vases are destined to be unable to block the wind and rain, as long as you can show them benefits and hope. What are you panicking about? The House of St. Prospero has been through a lot. Are you going to lose your confidence over such a small issue? The Earl of Avon glanced at the nobles of the eastern region in front of him again, but this time, there was less scrutiny and more encouragement and expectation. I am confident that I can stabilize the situation in White Dew City, but I need your help. If you believe me, you can stay. If you don't, you can leave. It's your choice. Of course, for those who are willing to stay, on behalf of the House of St. Prospero, I solemnly promise you loyalty will be rewarded. After saying these words, the Earl of Avon turned his back to the nobles of the eastern region, indicating that he would not interfere with their choice. The nobles suddenly became restless. Many people took this opportunity to quietly leave. However, even more people chose to stay behind. Because they realized one thing from the Earl of Avon's confident attitude and his promise now, the Earl of Avon was the first in line to succeed the Eastern region's Duke. If they lent a helping hand at this time, then in the future, when the Earl of Avon succeeded the throne, they would inevitably be rewarded handsomely. On the contrary, if they left now, it would be regarded as a betrayal. Once the Earl of Avon became the Duke of the Eastern region, he would certainly suppress them. If the Duchess was still alive, then most of the nobles of the Eastern region might hesitate. But now, the possibility of the Earl of Avon succeeding the throne was greater than ever. After a while, the Earl of Avon turned around again and showed a sincere smile to the remaining nobles of the Eastern region. Congratulations, you have made the right choice. An aristocrat stepped out from the crowd and said, My lord, we believe that you can bring stability and prosperity to the Eastern region. So, if you need us to do anything, please tell us. The Earl of Avon nodded and didn't beat around the bush. I need you to immediately gather the army and attack the Sky Horse Legion. The nobles of the Eastern region were suddenly dumbfounded. My lord? Are you sure? You want us to attack the Sky Horse Legion? Shouldn't we be suppressing the traitors of the Nickel family? The Earl of Avon shook his head and said in a deep voice, No. The real traitors are the Sky Horse Legion. The Nickel family is the force loyal to the House of St. Prospero. Hearing this, some of the smarter nobles finally reacted. In the Sky Horse Legion, there were forces loyal to the Duke of St. Prospero, Marquis Vincent, the Duchess, and even Knight Ivan. But there were no forces loyal to the Earl of Avon. Therefore, this army of the House of St. Prospero wasn't the Earl of Avon's support at all. On the contrary, it might even be an obstacle to his succession as the Duke of the Eastern region. After some whispering, the slow-witted nobles came back to their senses and agreed with the Earl of Avon's proposal. They were scared to death of the bloody cavalry, but they weren't afraid of the Sky Horse Legion, especially this one that had just been rebuilt and had low fighting power. So, the Earl of Avon ordered the nobles to disperse and gather their own troops. The Earl of Avon stood alone in front of White Dew Castle. After hesitating for a moment, he still didn't choose to enter. Since he had already persuaded the lords to gather their troops to attack the Sky Horse Legion, the Earl of Avon felt that there was no need for him to enter White Dew Castle. The situation in the castle was too complicated and dangerous. At least, before stabilizing the situation in White Dew City, the Earl of Avon wouldn't take the risk. Turning around, the Earl of Avon was about to leave when he saw a familiar figure. Anna? Why are you here? Anna looked at her brother coldly and asked, Brother, you still say that you didn't betray the family? The Earl of Avon suddenly had a headache and could only patiently explain. Anna, listen to me. The Sky Horse Legion has long become the source of the chaos in White Dew City. If I want to stabilize the situation, I have to. Anna didn't seem to listen to the Earl of Avon's explanation at all. She pulled out the great sword on her back and rushed over. Sister. Swoosh. The huge sword drew a ferocious arc in the air, but it brushed past the Earl of Avon's body and swept into the shadows at the corner of the street. Boom! A huge figure was forced out amidst the splashing of gravel. He was shrouded in a blood-red curtain of smoke, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. Only a pair of black bat wings stretched out more than 10 meters on both sides. The huge shadow almost covered half of the street. Only then did Count Elvin turn around in shock and blurt out, "My lord, I'm not a lord." Wing Knight. Chapter 492. The two of you, we meet again. Colin looked down at the Earl of Avon and Anna and said in a low voice. Anna held her sword with both hands and stared at Colin nervously because he gave her a lot of pressure. This made Anna extremely shocked because the last time she saw this winged knight in Silvermoon City, he was only at grade 4. But now, in less than 2 years, he seemed to have stepped into the threshold of grade 6. Even Anna, who had always been known as the #1 genius knight in the Eastern region, felt inferior to this speed of promotion. The Earl of Avon did not notice the change in Colin's strength. He just put on an expression of, as expected, and pointed at Colin. You really have a close relationship with the Angeli family. Colin looked at Count Elvin with great interest and asked, "What's the matter?" Then guess, what is my relationship with the Angeli family? The Earl of Avon rubbed his chin and really made a guess. Actually, I have always felt that Earl Angeli's promotion speed is too fast. He doesn't seem like the descendant of an unknown baron family, but more like the illegitimate son of a paladin family member who left behind in the Angeli family. And you, Mr. Wing Knight, I'm afraid that you are also related to this paladin family member. Maybe he secretly arranged a guardian knight beside his illegitimate son. Clap, clap. Colin clapped his hands and praised, "Earl of Avon, you are really smart." The Earl of Avon of course heard the sarcasm in Colin's words, but he did not care and continued to guess. "Mr. Winged Knight, if I'm not wrong, you should be a half-elf, right?" "Why?" Colin held back his laughter. "Is it because the last time we met was in the half-elf kingdom?" The Earl of Avon shook his head and pointed at Colin's huge bat wings. "You're a druid, aren't you? Although I don't know how you obtained this profession that should have disappeared along with the extinction of the high elves, you wouldn't have been able to become a druid without the elven bloodline." Colin neither admitted nor denied the Earl of Avon's guess. He only asked, "You seem to know a lot about druids, don't you?" "I do know a little about it." The Earl of Avon smiled and said, "I also know that there are detailed records about druids in Yeville's Mage Tower. Of course, you may not be able to enter the Mage Tower, but if you need, I can make a copy for you." "Really? Then I really have to thank you." "Of course. The House of St. Prospero has always been hospitable. Since you've come to White Dew City, I naturally have the obligation to treat you well." "Hospitality?" Colin smiled disdainfully and said in a cold tone, "I think Count Angeli has some opinions about this evaluation." The Earl of Avon sighed and said, "The death of Count Angeli is indeed very regrettable. But if you blame Count Angeli's death on the House of St. Prospero, then you've been tricked by the assassins." Colin blinked and asked, "Do you know who assassinated Count Angeli?" The Earl of Avon nodded and said in a sad and regretful tone, "If I'm not wrong, it should be my mother who did it." "Is that so?" Colin laughed silently. Unfortunately, this mocking smile was hidden in the blood mist and the Earl of Avon could not see it. "That's right, Mr. Winged Knight. I think you also know that my mother is the Archbishop of the Eastern region, and the Church has been trying to control the Eastern region to prevent the House of St. Prospero from making peace with other lords. When my father was alive, my mother still had some scruples, but now that my father is dead, she began to become unscrupulous. This time, she even brutally killed Count Angeli in an attempt to completely destroy the relationship between the Eastern region and the northern frontier. So, if you really choose to take revenge on the House of St. Prospero, then you'll be playing into the hands of the Church." Colin waved his bat wings and created an invisible cyclone on the empty street. At the same time, he said, "But how come I heard that your mother was also assassinated?" "Ah, the one who killed my mother was my Aunt Beatrice. There was already a grudge between the two of them." But this is a personal grudge and has nothing to do with Count Angeli's death. You don't have to think too much. Is that so? Colin took a step forward and said coldly, if your mother was really the murderer, but she's already dead. Who else can I take revenge on? The Earl of Avon's expression changed. When he was about to speak, he felt a pressure like the deep sea spreading out from Colin's body and instantly enveloping the whole street. So, Earl of Avon, use your life as a sacrifice to Count Angeli's soul. After saying that, Colin suddenly opened his mouth and sucked hard. Hiss! In an instant, the air on the whole street was crazily rushing toward Colin at the same time. Countless air currents formed a rapidly rotating vortex under the terrifying suction force. The earth was shaking and the air was roaring. The Earl of Avon's body stiffened and cold sweat soaked through his clothes. Anna, who was in front of him, looked solemn. She held her sword in both hands and stood in front of him. The wide blade of the sword was rapidly flowing with holy light, and in an instant, it opened into a huge white six-sided crystal. However, the heavy pressure around him was still rising. In Anna's eyes, the body of the winged knight in front of her seemed to be constantly expanding. Gradually, she had the illusion that the sky was covered by his body. The next second, Colin slightly opened his mouth, and endless terrifying energy burst out like a tide. It covered the sky and covered the earth, sweeping away everything. The whole street seemed to have been ravaged by a violent tornado, and rows of houses were all destroyed. The white crystal in front of Anna slowly rotated, but it was difficult to maintain it. Small cracks that could be seen with the naked eye had quietly appeared and were rapidly spreading in an uncontrollable trend. Cut. The cracks extended to the huge sword in Anna's hand, and the magic patterns imprinted on it were shining with dazzling light, but it still could not stop itself from collapsing. Anna's slender body began to tremble, and red blood dripped from her mouth. Only then did the Earl of Avon come back to his senses. With a shake of his arm, a staff inlaid with a huge purple magical crystal slipped from his cuff. Catching the staff, the Earl of Avon quickly made a few gestures in front of his chest. The purple magical crystal shone with a strange light, leaving marks in the air. When the marks gradually formed a complicated magic circle, the Earl of Avon's eyes widened and roared, Elin Silalia Minomentilvo. Boom! The huge purple magical crystal at the top of the staff in the Earl of Avon's hand suddenly exploded, turning into countless fine powder that drifted in the air. In the dark night sky, a distant star seemed to twinkle. The next moment, the Earl of Avon seemed to have turned into a star. For a moment, the light was boundless. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.